What happened in the last few days has turned the table upon the Chinese, and I think they're caught in quicksand. Establishment 22, the boys of Vikas or SFF as we know them, they went across, they hammered the Chinese and they captured Chinese territory. There was also that element of a message when the Special Frontier Force went and took over those heights from the Chinese when they destroyed a camp and took it over. India was trying to pass a message and they were saying, look, the people who hammered the Chinese are actually Tibetans. You took their land and they hammered you. We're dealing with China. China, which has no democracy. China, which has no electoral process. China, which does not have the rule of law as democracies know it. It does not have freedom of expression. It does not have freedom of religion. It is not secular in the sense that they dislike religion. Religion is banned. We are not dealing with regular people. We are not dealing with a normal country. All these countries have ganged up together against China. They have come together against China. And who does China have standing in its quarter? Pakistan? North Korea? Is this company that any country would appreciate? I mean, what kind of a country says that my best friends are Pakistan and North Korea? What kind of a country is that? Now, what India is doing is banning application after application, and this is hitting the Chinese image extremely hard. Those people who say that this is not a big deal, I can tell you, this is a super big deal. Now, the Chinese are caught between the devil and the deep sea. The Chinese don't know which, as we say in the Indian Army, the Chinese don't know which side is north. The compass is not working. They're totally confused. They're stuck there. I'd like to say to the People's Liberation Army, winter is coming. And to Xi Jinping, I'd like to say, you know nothing, Jon Snow. Hi, this is Major Gaurav Arya and you're watching Defensive Offense. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you get our latest videos first. So, Vaibhav, in the last few days, something very strange and unique has happened in eastern Ladakh. And so far, history is witness to the fact that whether it was 1962 or 1967, the wars or the skirmishes that we had even in 67 in Nathula. And then you talk about Galwan this year. What happened in the last few days has turned the table upon the Chinese, and I think they're caught in quicksand. And I'll tell you why. I'll give you 2-3 reasons why I'm saying this, because the Chinese typically work on the principle of overwhelming force. So they came to the line of actual control to teach India a lesson. And what happened was a small special forces force called the SFF, the Special Frontier Force, also earlier known informally as Establishment 22 or Establishment 22, and called Vikas. We had Vikas when I was posted in Poo. We had one Vikas battalion with us, and I'll tell you more about these guys. It's fascinating, these Vikasis, what they do and where do they owe their origins from. So anyway, the Chinese started off in Pengongso Lake. They were repulsed. My unit is currently stationed there, and Pengongso Lake forms a large part of my unit's AOR, area of responsibility. I'm able to divulge these things because they've already been discussed in the media, and the media has shown photographs of my unit and by name, identifying 17 Kumaon. So the unit did a fantastic job, but what has actually come into the limelight is this small special forces unit. Now, who are these people? What is the Special Frontier Force? Many people in India had never heard about the Special Frontier Force. Now, it goes back to India's defeat in the 1962 war. There was a feeling of humiliation. You've lost a war. But we lost a war not because of military reasons. We lost a war because of political reasons. And I don't want to make it political, but the fact is that we used a very small quantum of our army. We did not use the Air Force. We should have used the Air Force because at that time our Air Force was far, far better than the Chinese Air Force. But we did not use our Air Force. Now, what happened was that we suffered a massive reversal. In the month of November 1962, the ceasefire was signed and the Chinese went back. We lost Aksai Chin. Thousands upon thousands of square kilometers of land, which was Indian territory, the Chinese occupied. 1962 still rankles somewhere in our hearts. Because it wasn't a fair fight. You know, to a very large extent, our own political setup, maybe because they were naive, maybe because they didn't know, or maybe because Nehru wanted to play statesman. You know, you have those cravings inside you to be seen as a statesman, as a global ambassador of peace, flying white doves. Now with the Chinese eat doves, by the way, so they're not interested in white doves of peace. We suffered a reversal. Immediately after independence, the need was felt by the government headed by Jawaharlal Nehru, in which he made that comment that we don't even need the army. We are a peace-loving nation. Gandhi ka desh hai, it's Gandhi's country. And to quell minor disturbances, riots and crime, a police force is more than sufficient. We don't really need an army, is what I have heard about so far. Now what happened was, we suffered a surprise in 1947-48, then again in 62, again in 67. Coming back to the story about the Special Frontier Force. Now these are mostly, not all, but mostly Tibetan troops. And they're not part of the Indian Army. It is a classic paramilitary force, the Special Frontier Force, a special force, but a paramilitary force in which all these fighters are Special Forces soldiers, they are paratroopers, they are commandos, and they form part of the research and analysis wing, RAW. Initially, the core of Establishment 22, or the Special Frontier Force as we know them today, was the bodyguards, or were the bodyguards of the Dalai Lama when the Dalai Lama fled Tibet and came to India, and we gave him sanctuary and we set up a government in exile in Dharamsala. That was the time when these volunteers, very tough Tibetans, they volunteered for this force. And genetically, they are adept at fighting at high altitude areas. Not very many people know that initially they were trained by the CIA. They were trained by the American Green Berets. And they were trained by the best of the best in the business. So they have been used in the past against the Chinese for limited operations along the border, mostly reconnaissance. But this time, what they did was, the Chinese were feeling frisky, and Establishment 22, the boys of Vikas, or SFF as we know them, they went across, they hammered the Chinese, and they captured Chinese territory. One interesting fact I'd like to say and tell our audience about the SFF. I don't know what the current tradition in the SFF is, but one point in time, in the army or in the forces, we have something called the NOK, next of kin. So, let's say if I am there and I die or I fall in combat, right? So, my pension and all my monetary benefits go to my mother or my father. Something like that. So my mother or my father become my next of kin, as in my relatives, to whom my financial assets will be given to by the force. All Tibetans, without exception, they used to write in their forms against the next of kin, they used to write, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So that was the level of dedication to the Dalai Lama. I don't know what is the tradition right now, but hardy troops. We've always maintained, Vaibhav, in our various videos, that I think somebody is listening to us. I get this idea that somebody upstairs is listening to us, and even when we think ourselves that maybe we don't make so much of sense sometimes, because all our ideas are very simple ideas which we think need to be executed. But we had mentioned 1.5 to 2 months back that you need to put these Sons of the Soil concept regiments and battalions of the Sikkim Scouts, the Garhwal Scouts, the Kumaon Scouts, the Arunachal Scouts, the Ladakh Scouts, and the other Scouts. You need to put them at the forefront with the Chinese. That happened. We also mentioned in the same video about putting the Special Frontier Force, and the Special Frontier Force was put. They did a fantastic job. So this is something that China is not bound to forget in a hurry. China, web of respects strength. Let us not fool ourselves. Let our policymakers, especially the bureaucrats who advise the Prime Minister, they have spent an entire career playing safe. A bureaucrat by his very nature plays safe. And they're very intelligent people. I'm not saying that they're not. But we must understand, this is not America that we're dealing with. This is not Europe that we're dealing with. We're dealing with China. China, which has no democracy. China, which has no electoral process. China, which does not have the rule of law as democracies know it. It does not have freedom of expression. It does not have freedom of religion. It is not secular in the sense that they dislike religion. Religion is banned. They're an atheist government. So, we are not dealing with regular people. We are not dealing with a normal country. And this is something that China's wealth, China's money, had hidden from the eyes of the world deliberately. And when I say deliberately, this act was not on part of China, it was on part of the rest of the world. They only saw Chinese money. And we are partially guilty too, because our businesses also only saw Chinese money. The real face of China was revealed in Galwan Valley. And there has been an outpouring of national anger after Galwan. And today, I'm very happy to tell our viewers that we have an aggressive posture. There are reports being carried, because I have not been there exactly at that place. So I'm not in a position to give you absolute facts. I can only quote international media. The same international media that was a month and a half back or 2 months back saying that the Chinese have come into Ladakh and the Chinese have, taken over Indian territory, etc., etc. Those very newspapers are today saying that the Indians have gone 4 kilometers inside the line of actual control through what the Indians believe is their line of actual control. So when you talk about Chushul sector and Rizangla, so we spoke about Magar Hill and Gurung Hill and all these places, right? These are historical places. The Battle of Rizangla was fought there in Chushul sector, in the place called Rizangla. And who can forget the legendary, the immortal Major Shaitan Singh Bhati and his brave Ahirs, in which 122 brave Indian soldiers led by Major Shaitan Singh Bhati fought against 3,000 Chinese who were supported by artillery. This is right there with the Battle of Thermopylae and right there with the Battle of Saragadi. It's right there at the very top. So this iconic battle was fought there, and the action again has happened exactly around that same area. And it's so heartening for a person like me, who's from the Kumaon Regiment, because my regiment fought there. And today I hear news that SFF in that entire area, actually this Rizangla and the Chushul sector is east of the Pengongso Lake. So let's say this is the Pengongso Lake, it's east towards the right. If you stand on that road and look at Pengongso, it's towards the right. And at that location, this action has taken place. Fantastic, wonderful action. We've gone and hammered the Chinese. And I always say this, you can have meetings, you can have brigadier level meetings, major general, lieutenant general meetings. You can even have, and Modi ji did have a meeting with Xi Jinping. You know that they sat on that swing along the Sabarmati and they had their walks and all that. Yeah. So both these heads of state sat down and they spoke about the Wuhan spirit. And they said that we must continue to be friends. And then what does China do? It does a Dokulam. And after, we thought that we had pacified China literally and said that, it doesn't matter, go back, let's not fight. And we have so many problems of our own, let's look at it, war is not a solution. But China never understands. And why is this happening? A lot of people, even in the media, the so-called defense analysts, people with years and years of doing defense analysis, they've all come up with these satellite images, and so have I, by the way. These are Chinese stands, these are Indian stands. No, this is the Galwan River and the water was dried up and engineering effort, blah, blah, blah. But not many people have actually spoken about why China is doing this. Why should China be doing all this? Why is China doing this now? This dispute has been carrying on for donkey's years. Why didn't China do this 10 years ago, 15, 20, 25, 30 years ago? Why just now? We must speak about this and reiterate it at every opportunity that we get. And the truth, Webber, is that Wuhan had a biological weapons lab. Whether it was accidental or deliberate, the virus, COVID-19, went berserk, so to say. It was out of control. World economies collapsed. GDPs were hit. People died. Millions are in quarantine. There is absolute chaos and mayhem all over the world. Flights, the entire scenario of the world as we know it has been disrupted. I've never seen such a time in my entire life where such a thing has happened. And this was perhaps China's aim, because China sprang back on its feet almost immediately. And how did that happen? Because China was prepared for it. But what China did not know, and anyway, I'll come back to that point later. See the top 10 virus attacks in the last 50 years. Top 10 virus attacks. And you'll realize that most of them originate from China. Not all of them, but most of them originate from China. China does this once in a while. Let's lose a virus on the rest of the world to terrify the world into submission. And what happened here was, China thought people will forget, like people have usually forgotten. But this time, there was huge pushback. There was tremendous pushback on Xi Jinping. And the number 2 and number 3 in the CCP actually wrote a letter to the Politburo, whatever they call that, their thing, internal working team, and said that we have lost faith in Xi Jinping because of coronavirus. Xi Jinping is responsible for making this entire world our enemy. That is what they said. It was a remarkable letter given the fact that the Chinese don't know the meaning of freedom of expression. It was a remarkable letter. And all these things that are taking place, the new rule, the draconian rules for Hong Kong, the aggressive posture against Taiwan, the attack in Galwan, and this entire episode along the line of actual control which is happening and future episodes that will happen. All these things are a result, and I believe this is my analysis, that these are all a result of domestic Chinese Communist Party politics and Xi Jinping wanting to save himself, because in China they don't take very kindly to ex-rulers. You'll never find out that here is an ex-president of China who's having a great time with his grandchildren. I mean, it's normally doesn't happen like that in China. He's down there with the fishes, or he's somewhere there in confinement or luxurious confinement, but they don't take very kindly to ex-rulers and all that. So anyway, Xi Jinping, it is said that he's coming up for election also. That is the second reason. He's coming up for re-election. Now, what has happened is that if he can get India to bow down by these actions along the line of actual control, if he can get India to quote-unquote surrender, then his brand becomes Teflon coated. Then nobody can touch Xi Jinping. The problem is India is not playing ball. And there was also that element of a message when the Special Frontier Force went and took over those heights from the Chinese when they destroyed a camp and took it over. India was trying to pass a message, and they were saying, look, the people who hammered the Chinese are actually Tibetans. You took their land and they hammered you. So in many ways, the messaging, I'm not saying this is happening on ground, I'm saying the messaging is, this is something like the Tibetan freedom struggle. India is hitting China where it's hurting China the most. But never forget that all this is happening because of China's internal political struggles. Somebody else wants to become the president of China. Somebody else wants to become the leader of the Communist Party of China. And Xi Jinping is standing in the way. And somebody else should become the leader of China, because Xi Jinping has totally messed it up for China. Today, look at Europe, look at America, look at tiny Taiwan, look at super tiny Burma. All these countries have ganged up together against China. They have come together against China. And who does China have standing in its quarter? Pakistan? North Korea? Is this company that any country would appreciate? I mean, what kind of a country says that my best friends are Pakistan and North Korea? What kind of a country is that? So Australia has increased exponentially its defense budget. Japan is taking a very, very aggressive posture. The Quad is coming back to life. So the world is slowly closing ranks. India, a few days back, banned more than 100 Chinese apps. Again, they banned PUBG also a few days back. This ban on software will have a very serious effect on Chinese businesses. And I'm not just talking about valuations, and I'm not talking about, the Chinese stock market. No, that is not my point. China was using these mobile phone applications as alternatives. So Weibo is ideally an alternative to Twitter or Facebook or YouTube or whatever, because these Western applications don't work inside China. You go across Hong Kong, you travel 20 kilometers out of Hong Kong, everything stops here. You enter China, everything stops. You don't have YouTube, you don't have Twitter, anything. The Chinese have their own apps. Now, Chinese were thinking of India as a staging ground for further expansion in the West. And there's so many Americans who are using PUBG and they were using TikTok and other apps. Now, India has banned all these applications. And this, most importantly, has given the Western world, Europe and America, what in judicial parlance is known as precedence. And India said that we feel our security is at stake, our cyber security is at stake because China is collecting data. And with the onset of 5G, because China is one of the market leaders in 5G, and there are companies which are, trying for contracts all over the world. They're working very hard and saying that we want this contract. And Huawei was one company which said that, we want a contract to roll out 5G in India. Now, that's not happening any longer. And if you remember last year, when Huawei was, India said that we'll look at whether this company should be allowed or not. For various reasons in India, the Ministry of External Affairs of China literally threatened India and said that there will be consequences. This is the true face of China. You don't give one company access and China starts threatening people. You see? Now, what India is doing is banning application after application, and this is hitting the Chinese image extremely hard. Those people who say that this is not a big deal, I can tell you, this is a super big deal. The Chinese IT companies' names, their reputations, today lie in the mud. PUBG, TikTok, their names are mud. They've been banned. Chinese 5G operations all over the world. Britain, which had its 4G network riding on the back of Chinese technology, has said no to Chinese 5G. They simply said no. And there is nothing China can do about it. America said no, there is nothing China can do about it. India said no. Mukesh Ambani came and said that I have built a network today which has not one single Chinese component, there's not one screw and nut and bolt here in Geo, which is Chinese, and I'm building 5G and I'll roll it out next year. So if Europe is not with you, if America is not with you, if India is not with you, if Australia and Japan are not with you, if Taiwan is not with you, and South Korea, by extension, is not with you, where are you going to sell your stuff? Mongolia. It's going to be very difficult. And with Trump, and if Trump wins in this coming election, I can assure you, Vaibhav, it's going to be a magnificent slap on the face of Xi Jinping. It's going to be a solid slap. Because he's going to shut down Chinese businesses in America one by one. All the Confucius institutes have been shut down. We are reviewing them in India, we'll shut them down too. Trump will shut them down. Trump is a little mercurial and temperamental, he'll just tweet and say that, from tomorrow 8 o'clock in the morning, everything is shut down. So he'll do that. And he's the president of the United States, he can do that. China understands Trump's language. It does not understand the language of decency. And I think while banning apps, while cancelling contracts of Chinese companies, while actually being very aggressive diplomatically and economically, this action by the Tibetans and Indian Army officers of the Special Frontier Force actually heralds a new beginning, a new dawn in Indian armies or the militaries or our forces fight back against the Chinese, taking a proactive approach. Not just saying that the Chinese will attack and then we will defend ourselves, no. Preemptive strikes inside China. Let China also feel fear. I think it's high time that China felt fear. So all those who say that, they're blaming the Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, saying that he hasn't even dared take China's name. The famous speech at Ladakh, where he didn't take China's name and all the opposition parties were saying, he has not taken China's name and he doesn't have courage, and the 56-inch chest that he talks about, that's all fake. They were saying all these things. Think about it. Just think. India is the only country which has actually, quote-unquote, put economic sanctions on China. Maybe sanctions is not the right word, but we have actually stopped Chinese companies from working in India. We have cancelled their contracts big time. So in effect, billions of dollars worth of contracts have gone, if you count all the mobile phone apps, number one. Number two, while America has sent its B-52 bombers and it's sent its aircraft carriers and strike groups inside the South China Sea, but the fact of the matter remains, very interestingly, that whatever said and done, Vaibhav, we're the only country that killed Chinese soldiers in Galwan, killed a Chinese soldier a few days back, captured Chinese soldiers and took them POW as per some foreign media reports. We are in effect, that is India, is the only country that is fighting against China militarily, economically and diplomatically. And yet if people say that your Prime Minister does not even have the courage to take China's name, I don't think it's required. You're killing Chinese soldiers. You're capturing their land. You're taking them POW. You're giving them a hammering of a lifetime on the economic front. Diplomatically, again, Pakistan tried to raise the Kashmir issue with China's help and India blocked it. What else do you want? You're hammering the Chinese left, right and center. And the Chinese have now a big point that I must mention here. Now the Chinese are caught between the devil and the deep sea. The Chinese don't know which, as we say in the Indian Army, the Chinese don't know which side is north. The compass is not working. They're totally confused. They're stuck there. Vaibhav, to give a Game of Thrones analogy, I'd like to say to the People's Liberation Army, winter is coming. And to Xi Jinping, I'd like to say, you know nothing, Jon Snow.